Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Happy New Year to the Impactivity Talking Without Limits podcast, a conversation with episode 6. So exciting. I am joined today, it's a family affair, by my auntie, Kirsty Ryley. Kirsty, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so pleased you've asked me to come on. I'm really excited to be here, and I hope we can have a really good conversation about my experiences of mental health within my profession.
Good. I'm so happy to have you here. It's a really interesting one today. Obviously, we're stepping away from sport a little bit because Kirsty is a qualified vet with experience in exotic nursing, teaching, lecturing, referral nursing, and also running her own vet practice. And is also an advocate of better support with mental health issues for the veterinary profession. Obviously, we will be speaking about how sport and physical activity can play a part with the veterinary profession as we go along. But it's really important to get this message out here, as I'm sure we'll find out going on. So like every episode I've done so far, I'm going to pass it over to you to tell your story in a little bit more detail. You can do it more justice than me. So I want to throw it over to you now, and then when you're done, we'll put you in the hot seat and the questions are going to begin. So Kirsty, over to you.
Thanks. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I know it's sort of a little bit off, but I think it's really important to show that we're all going through this. It's not just one sector. And one of the things that I found quite poignant when we were chatting about me coming on, how your experiences and my experiences are so intermingled, but we don't cross those barriers and talk about them. We do as a family, but we don't with people, and that's so important. First thing, so when we were chatting and I said to you, I know suicide rates are high in the veterinary profession, I actually went off and got some stats, and those stats scared me. 4 times higher than the general population, veterinary medicine, and 2 times higher than any other medical profession. So I know I have kind of my reasons why that sort of thing happens. And I think one of them is I felt sometimes, especially when I was in senior positions, an overwhelming feeling of loneliness, that I couldn't talk to my boss about. Maybe I was a bit sad that day because we'd lost a patient that I really cared about, because you don't want to be seen as being unprofessional. Crying when you lose a patient, well, that's not seen to be good, is it? You can't show the client your emotions, that you're sad about their pet leaving. But then I started thinking about it a bit more deeply and looking into it and why. So I thought I'd just go through a few reasons why. So I'm looking at people's experiences that I've spoken to, and also people's experiences on the internet and things like that, of how they felt. One of the things that I don't think people understand is I deal with death every single day. Only forget, obviously, other countries with euthanasia, but we're the only profession that actually actively puts an animal to death, puts something to death every day by choice. We choose to do that. And we have to do that with a facade of professionalism. We can't show too much emotion because it's the owner's perspective, it's their perception, their time with their animal. And the profession, we are asked to do this in a professional way with a bit of detachment. So you kind of, what's the first thing everyone says with mental health now is don't close it down. But that's kind of what we have to do. We have to compartmentalize. Don't look at that fluffy animal in front of you. Just stay there. Be compassionate, yes, but don't show your true feelings. And I've been taught that since I started in the veterinary profession when I was 15, and my first euthanasia was a couple of days later, and I was taught that by my boss. You're professional, don't look sad, look compassionate, but you can't emotions, and that's drummed into us. And I think vets and nurses, especially those in, all of us, but especially those in senior roles, can't go then to our sort of younger colleagues or more junior colleagues and say, I've had a really bad day. I'm feeling upset because I've had to put 3 animals to sleep today, or something's died in my care. We're always told to be detached.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. And I think as well as dealing with death every day, I think we as a profession, and doctors I think are the same, we try and fix ourselves. We don't try and look at the profession for help. So one sad example is someone I worked with quite closely had obviously a lot of undealt with mental health issues, pain. She'd gone through a lot of trauma in the past, and she dealt with it by self-medicating. And that self-medication escalated. It started off with alcohol, then it went to taking Prozac, but taking it herself, animal version. The end, it ended up actually self-harming and methadone. And none of us actually, methadone being the heroin substitute, if anyone knows. And she made herself very, very ill, and she had to in the end be sectioned because she was that far. And it was many years ago now, we're talking 15, 20 years ago. And it would probably be of notice sooner. I worked with her, and I didn't think about why she was constantly wearing under her tunics long sleeve tops in the summer. Because you weren't aware that's because where all the scars of her self-harming. And it came from a place of hurt and loneliness and not being able. She was the vet. She's not going to reach out maybe to someone, even though we work closely together. She's not, and I didn't have the toolbox or the sort of emotional intelligence of what people have now, that these things you need to look at. You need to go and have that conversation with that person, or if you can't personally, find someone who can help them.
100%. I think like this is where we've spoke about like the similarities in terms of where mental health struggles are beginning, and a lot of the situations start with you having to put a facade on or a face on in front of other people. And that's, you know, one of the reasons I've struggled so much is because I was always I'm the big man. I had to be the big character and shoulder to cry on. So I just want to jump on that because I think it's really important when you speak about this face that you have to put on in front of maybe people they're your employee, or even like the patient's, you know, owners. Is that something that's like changing now? Like if you had younger vets training with you, obviously you've still got to show the compassion, but do you encourage them to maybe talk a little bit more, or is it a bit more acceptable to show a little bit of emotion away from the owners, I guess, now?
Definitely. I think we have opened up more barriers, broken them down and said, look, we are working in a lonely, you can have 20 people working with you, but it is still, that patient is your patient. You can't, you're the one who's missed your lunch break to make sure that animal's lived or whatever. And it's good to now say, I do feel for this animal. I know it's not mine. I know I've only looked after it for 12 hours, but it's been an intensive 12 hours. And I'm sad that something's happened. And I think it is changing. Perceptions are changing. But I think sometimes, from my experience over the last probably 5-6 years, there's been a lot of more mindfulness and well-being when I've been to CPD, and that's brilliant. It's getting it out there. We've now got the VetLife charity where you can call them and speak to them if you're struggling. But I still think the grassroots of it are, come on, the animal's died, it's sad, right, come on, what's the next patient kind of. I still don't think we've fully got it, and I think we've got a long way to go. And I think it is starting, and there's probably different perceptions and different practices. And as time goes on, I'm hoping we'll all embrace it and say, look, we're human, we care, that's why we do the job. So sometimes we're just going to go, I can't deal with this, I'm sad. And we had a structure in my practice. If there was things that were going on, they didn't have to necessarily tell me how they were getting on, but they could say, you know what, today I don't want to be on the front line with people. Could I be the one in the office filling in insurance forms, because
Yeah.
that's the only headspace I have.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily, I don't need them to tell me everything. They might not want to open up to me, but we had that facility to go, actually, I want to stand back from this. I don't want to be dealing with this major emergency today because I haven't got the headspace for that, because I'm not in a good place today.
Yeah.
Can I go and sit upstairs, or can I spend a day cleaning?
Yeah. And how do you envisage that working, Kirsty? Like, obviously we say that they'll be taken away from the front line and stuff. Is this something, I know in like different like in medicine, in like doctors, nurses, in the police, they have debriefs and stuff after like big emergencies. Is that something in the veterinary profession that you also do as well, if there's been something that's really emotionally affected someone?
We don't in the smaller practices, but I know they do in the bigger hospitals and things like that.
Okay.
And I know there's talk about bringing this sort of idea through for frontline professionals who are dealing with the horrible stuff. So I'm talking the nurses who do a cracking job, who work with the RSPCA cases and things like that. I've done it. I know how soul destroying it is. There's a lot of more support there, because we were kind of, I remember when I first got into doing rescue work with the RSPCA and things, you were kind of thrown into it and you saw some awful stuff and you didn't know how to get rid of those thoughts in your head. How could I have made that better? How could I have stopped that happening? And also you get a lot of anger. Why could someone do that? And the support networks are there more now. We still, as a profession, we are here. We should be way behind the times. There are some brilliant forward thinkers, but I would say we've only been looking at this for 7-8 years in our profession. Which some of the professions have been looking at this 15-20 years.
100%.
Have some much better infrastructure than we have. And I think as well, whilst we've been dealing with all these issues, the public perception of vets has changed. And not so much veterinary nurses, because we're not so much public eye. We're getting there, we're trying to be. But vets, definitely, the public used to see us, and you're too young to know who this guy is, but as the James Herriot kind of lovely, cuddly, they're there, all they want to do is help animals. We still are those, but there are cost implications that come with fixing your pets. And unfortunately, a lot nurses and vets will come out with major debt. What we actually get paid isn't what the public think. They think we're on hundreds of thousands a year. Average nurse salary is about 22,000 a year. When you think you've come out of uni, £8,000 a year for 4 years. You've got a lot of debt behind you, and then the long hours and things, and the public assuming that I'm going to take their pet's bill and I'm going to drive off in my Porsche because all that money has gone to me. They don't realize that. And so social media has really made it hard for the veterinary profession. People being vilified by people who are keyboard warriors all over the country. One poor vet had a breakdown because she was just abused so bad. She made a mistake with a diagnosis. Everyone's human. And unfortunately, the patient died. And that's really bad. And she must feel worse than anyone else who's speaking to her. But her face was plastered all over social media. This is the person who killed my dog, basically. So imagine how that must... Well, we've all seen it with celebrities when it's happened to them. Luckily, she had a support network. She didn't take her own life. But there are... For each person who doesn't, there are another 5 or 6 vets and nurses who have, unfortunately. And it's a big problem in the profession.
I think that's one thing that stood out during like your intro, and I actually went away after our first conversation and did some reading, and that stat that the suicide rates amongst the veterinary profession is like 4 times the national average is, it's just it's mind-blowing. And obviously, as you've said already, you're dealing with very emotional things on a day-to-day basis. You're dealing with death on a day-to-day basis and stuff. Obviously, that is something that needs support. And if you know, if you're operating in a lonely place like that and a sad place like that, obviously there is more that needs to be done. You know, with that in mind and the suicide rates being the highest, why, apart from it being a bit lonely and, you know, dealing with those emotions, why else do we think that is? And after that, is there enough done to support you from outside sources? So obviously you've got the support network in place in your business or wherever you're working, but is there enough being done for you, the veterinary profession, outside?
It's getting there, but I think there was, this is only my personal viewpoint, other people may have a different. Our governing body, they're moving forward now, but they were quite old school. So it was kind of almost brushed under the carpet that this kind of thing was happening. We have to remember, we have access to controlled drugs. We have access to a drug that we can put into a drip and it will euthanize us. So basically lethal injection, we have that. We have access to all your things like methadone, pethidine, all those kind of drugs. And as I said, that one vet I worked with, to numb her pain, she started with drink and ended up nearly on heroin. And same thing, but we have maybe easier access to this stuff. Also, there's a lot of lone working. So you are sometimes on a night shift on your own. And we don't, as a profession, we talk about stuff, but I haven't had very many conversations with people about, I'm not coping with my job. And I think as well, the buck stops with, so vets and veterinary nurses, if things go wrong, we can be removed off the register. We can. So you've got that pressure of what the client's perception of us, our job is. And you almost, when you take that animal in, you always want to do the best. And a lot of vets and vet nurses by nature are perfectionists. And we're working with an intangible. I mean, who says never work with children and animals? We're working with animals. So you're working with that intangible. We always want to send the animal home fixed. And when we don't, even if we know the outcome wasn't going to be a fix, in our heart, we want to save that animal, because that's what we do. And when you don't, it's a difficult situation. And when it's like, well, it's part of the job, animals die, and you get that told by other people, it is difficult to talk about it, and you feel maybe silly being sad about it. I remember when I'd just taken on a senior nurse position in a practice, and I had a student nurse come to me, and she'd lost her first animal under anaesthetic. She was, I don't know whether I can do this anymore. And you have to try and sort of support them, show them that unfortunately this does happen, but it's good to feel sad, and let's embrace that and say, what are we going to do to then move on and maybe improve what we're doing in the future, or just be able to talk to someone. So I think that's an issue, that we have kind of this, and also unsociable hours. So we don't get so much of the camaraderie of maybe a group in an office would, of, do you want to go to the pub quiz after work? Because one of us is always waiting back to be on the late shift or do the night shift. We don't walk out the building on time. So you can set up a coffee date with a friend, and the amount of times I've set up things to do with friends and stuff and had to say, oh, really sorry, I'm going to be late, or I'm not going to get there at all because we've had an emergency brought in. So it's kind of, and I also think that sometimes we're quite cliquey as a profession. We know a lot of other people and stuff like that. So you'll go to a conference, and a lot of us know each other, or we know someone who knows, been to uni with someone. And I think that actually makes the mental health conversations actually harder. Because I might sit down next to you, I might not know you, but because you're from a different profession and you might not know someone I've been friends with in the past, I might be more open talking to a stranger than someone who, is she weak because she's saying that she's not coping with her job anymore, but she's
Mhm.
supposed to be a high-powered business owner, but she's saying actually she's not coping with her job? Do I want to tell the person next to me that, who might get back to someone I went to uni with?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I think that's like one of the toughest things that I found was, obviously I knew I had trouble, but originally it was the perception from other people. What were other people going to think that stopped me talking more? And a lot of guests that I've had on the podcast, it all comes back to the same thing, and that's the perception of other people. And hopefully conversations like we're having today are something that go towards removing that perception, especially in a profession like we've already said. It's still blowing my mind now, where we're talking about 4 times the national average on suicides and stuff. Conversations are clearly something that need to be, celebrated rather than, told to put under the carpet. So with that in mind, and we're talking about these conversations, you've had loads of different roles in your career in the sector. Like, how have you managed like your own difficulties? And then with that, you've gone from teaching people, so your pupils, you've been in charge of people, so your employees. How have you tried to manage that as well as dealing with those perceptions, I guess?
I think I've been quite lucky in that I had avenues outside work, and one of the things I think I kind of thought this was the kind of thing we were going to talk about, and why hasn't it affected me as I've seen it affect some of my colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things is having avenues that weren't veterinary.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of vet nurse partnerships and things like that. So when I first started in my career, my partner wasn't veterinary.
Okay.
And that made a massive difference, because I'd go out with him and his friends and we weren't talking about all the stuff that had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And at my friend group, we were 4 vet nurses, really close friend group, but none of us had partners who were veterinary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that helped. I think having avenues of friends who are bonded with, like with sport and things like that. So one of the things I used to do is every week I'd go and do aqua aerobics with a group of friends.
Mm-hmm.
And we would laugh because I was rubbish at it. I'd half drown myself most weeks. And then we'd go in for a coffee afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
and we just talk about anything, the weather. It doesn't matter what you're talking about, but you're not stuck in that lonely place of all to do with my job.
Yeah.
And I think when I did find it more difficult when I was in a senior position,
Mm-hmm.
rather than a junior position, because you're kind of having to lead by example. And if the example coming from above you is be stoical, hide your emotions, don't pass it on, you're having to pass that down to the junior team, because that's what your boss is kind of telling you.
Yeah.
And I know my first boss, amazing guy, but he struggled
Mm-hmm.
with his mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was coming from a place of old school veterinary practice of you need to be stoical, you need to do your job, and why you're being emotive over this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't happen. So that's one of the ways that I coped, just having a friend and a family network where we just went out and had a laugh and did stuff, games nights, that kind of idea. But then when I started working with other people, it was trying to get the junior nurses to sort of just chat to me. You had a good day today? What went great? What didn't go great? And it wasn't from a mental health mindset. It was just from a supporting that person.
Mm-hmm.
Then in the profession, and just supporting them and opening those conversations up. Yeah, I did have a really bad day. I was really sad when that happened. What could I have done better, or how could I have changed that? And I think also from a profession, we did have what have you done to not do that? So the sort of, is it me? Should I be blamed? No, we're a team.
Mm-hmm.
We're a team. If something doesn't go to plan, we lose a patient or a client's unhappy or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not one person, it's the team.
Uh-huh.
And I think that is really changing now. We are more team orientated as a profession, but there used to be very much a sort of, scapegoating's a bit harsh, but you were the last person to touch it.
Yeah.
So I think making sure, but just now I know the job I'm doing at the moment, we get together a couple of times a week and we just say, how are you getting on? Anything good happen? Anything bad you want to talk about? Could be at home, could be at work, it doesn't matter. And we just have a conversation.
Yeah.
And you come out of that half an hour, twice a week team meeting and just think, yeah, I've got a little bit of a burden off my shoulders because I've spoken to someone.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I think that's, one of the most important things. And it's really good to hear that it's changing in a way where it's becoming a bit more team orientated. And thankfully, that's something that I can definitely agree with, and something that I promote coming from a sports background, that team atmosphere. You don't, like you've just said, you don't necessarily have to talk about what happened, but knowing that someone's got your back and you've got other people to turn to makes a big difference. And I guess especially when you're dealing with, such gulfs in emotion on a day-to-day basis, even probably on an hourly basis in some cases, it's really good to know that you've, got someone to have your back. Going back to, you spoke about like junior nurses and that you've been teaching. I'm really interested to see from your point of view, when you were training to now, that's what I'm gonna say. It's like we've got like a lot of time there, but in terms of the course, when you are training, when you train, did they give you anything about the emotional side of veterinary? And now, I don't know, is it something that's delivered on the training courses that, there is going to be emotion, you know where I'm going with it?
A massive. So I remember, I'm not going to name her, but the lecturer that I had, she opened up a textbook, lovely lady, opened up a textbook and read us through the stages of euthanasia.
Okay.
And it was literally, you get the patient in, you find the vein, you clean the vein, the needle in, the animal dies, basically. Okay. I mean, that's a basic snapshot. There was no, this is how you're going to feel. This is how the vet's going to feel. It was literally, you could have drawn a stickman diagram. It's all about how you do it effectively. You support the owner, you stay stoical, blah, 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 as we've said before. Now we talk about, you're going to have emotions. The first time I was there for euthanasia with an animal, the patient just came in, the vet said, Kirsty, can you come and give me a hand? I'm right, this is how you raise a vein, and then the animal's dead in my arms. And it's like, I was 15. It's like, wow, okay, a life has just gone from me. And I'd been there with my pets previously, but it was kind of hidden from us a bit. My mum and dad used to deal with stuff like that, but it was how quick. It's literally is like that, seconds from a live animal to nothing. And now when we get student nurses in practice, they are shown animals going to sleep under anaesthesia, and they know they're going to wake up afterwards, but they can see how it is. They're asked, are you ready yet? Do you want to do this? Do you want to see this? They don't do it as their first ever time in front of the client. There's a lot of easing people into it, and there's also a lot of sort of talking, this is may be what's going to happen, you may see this, you may see that. I didn't know any of that. I didn't know that the animal can move afterwards, all these sort of things. And also there's a lot more now about the holistic care of you, well-being, taking half an hour out. Veterinary nurses, I've been at work some days, and I've been at work 7 hours and I've not actually used the toilet yet because it's been that busy. And it's kind of, there is now a lot about, right, you need to stop and take a break. You can't look after that patient. I know there's 2 or 3 things you still need to do, but you can't look after that patient properly unless you go and have your lunch. But there's lots of us that have not done that. And I think now we kind of see the benefit of, yes, we are there, we want to be 100% for that patient, but you also see the benefit of taking a step back and just going and eating our sandwich. And someone actually saying to you, right, I know you're busy, but go and take a break. Someone else is there to take over. And also they're taught now in college more about, let's talk about what happens. Let's talk about the overall nursing picture. Let's talk about how you're feeling, how your colleagues might be feeling. How can you address? There's still a long way to go. It should be more curriculum. And I find we are getting it in CPD. So when we go to conferences and things, there'll be a whole stream of wellbeing. But and this might be me being quite a jaded person, and I do apologize for that. But sometimes I just wonder, how much do we go and sit in that hour lecture with all good intentions, and then life gets in the way? So I think from a profession, and that's not just veterinary, that's overboard, it needs to just be embedded as part of like a first aid box. Everyone in the world has a first aid box. People have got them in the cars and stuff like that. If I come to you with half my finger dropping off, you're going to know what to do.
100%.
There should be people in the workplace who go, that person's struggling. I don't physically know what to do, but I know someone who can.
100%.
Even if it's a small environment, we outsource it to someone, and we know there is someone. We could VetLife, for example, but there are structures in place to help these people, because it needs to be embedded in our culture. That we know what to do, not maybe personally, and there's people who may not want to deal with that. That's absolutely fine, and I can see that. But just knowing, right, I know there's a number I can call and they'll help them.
100%. I think it's really important that you bring that up. You know, like every business imaginable has a first aider, right? For example, Kirsty is the designated first aider in the office. Boom, I know who to go to when my arm has fell off. I am a big advocate now, and I think many people are starting to be. Most businesses, well, all businesses should have a mental health first aider as well. Now, like you said, it doesn't have to be randomly allocated. I believe with something like this, it should be someone who wants to be involved with it, just because of the nature of the conversations you are going to have. But if every business had a mental health first aider, or like you said, someone attached to them where they could refer employees to, or even as an owner, you can know you've got someone to go to. I think it starts to become a lot easier, and those conversations, do become easier. And I just want to go back a little bit. You've said that the conversations have started to become, a lot easier or more frequent, I guess, within your profession. Has that impacted business in a way, in terms of positivity? Does it make it easier? I know you're still dealing with, very strong and raw emotions, but those, little 30 minutes here and there to look after your employees' well-being, does that sort of help?
The problem with what's happened with us as a profession is we kind of, the mental health sort of, we're on it. Then we got hit by COVID. COVID just kicked the veterinary profession's backsides. We lost the ability to do our jobs. We weren't seen as key workers. The public perception of us massively changed. We got a lot of public abuse because we weren't doing what they wanted. And then we've got this explosion of animals in the UK that we haven't got enough vets and nurses to actually look after. So we kind of, it's like with us, it was like, oh, we get in there with the mental health. Oh, no, COVID's hit. Now we're all back to square one because we're fighting this battle. So yes, we are doing a lot better than we were. But I still think, like any profession, we've got a long way to go, but we're definitely behind the wave with where we are and where we should be right now. The fact that we still all know someone who's either tried to take their life and luckily got saved, or we've lost someone. That's because the profession is a small place. I know someone who I work with quite closely. Luckily, she didn't take her own life, but she could have. But luckily she got the support there, but other people haven't been so lucky. So I think we've got just a massive way to go. And I don't think COVID helped us, and we're still behind the times with how the public are perceiving us at the moment and things. And that really causes a lot of angst in the veterinary profession and things like that. So yes, we're getting there, and I'm hoping things like me having this conversation with you today is going to make a lot more people go, oh, there's other avenues, why don't we try something else, try joining with other organizations, and maybe actually opening up a little cliquey veterinary profession to actually get help from other industries who are doing it better than we are.
100%. I think that's what's, striking about all of this. We're talking about how lonely the veterinary profession can be and stuff like that, but I think you've just hit the nail on the head there. If you can open up to, different avenues, you can get a lot of help. Like, you're on a sports podcast right now, or a background, within sports, but there are so many things that cross over, especially with the subject of mental health, that I could stand in front of a conference full of vets, but they could walk away with more information as such than a vet talking to them, because we're coming from different perspectives. And that's what I've found on the podcast so far, talking to people from different backgrounds. I've took away something from each person that I can use in my workshops, or when I'm talking on podcasts, I'll use it. And I think that's where we need to get to, not just concentrating on, a certain sector, but how can we learn off and that's the only way we're going to go forward. Especially if we're in a sector which clearly is very far behind the curve in terms of promoting positive mental health.
That there are other people in the profession who probably won't have that quite cynical view. They may think we're but this is from my own dealings with friends, colleagues, and the conversations we have. There's still a lot of kind of, I don't know, jokes around it. Sort of, if someone tries to open up, it's kind of a joke and a laugh, and then kind of move on. Let's talk about something that isn't that, because it's like, I don't want to go there. So I think having these conversations with people and thinking, actually, I've told someone I'm having a really bad day today. They don't think any less of me. They don't think I'm a worse boss, a worse teacher. They just go, she's human, she's having a bad day. 100%. She cried because her patient died.
100%.
They're not going to, but the thought, so from my upbringing as well, I don't do crying. I don't tolerate crying. I'm just not a crying person. I was brought up, and then working in a profession where you don't get upset if a patient dies. That's your job.
Yeah.
So the first time I actually cried over a patient, I felt like my world had fallen apart because I did it in front of a colleague. It was night. I can remember it vividly. It was a little puppy, and the vet had said to me, it's doing all right now, go and so it's playing with me, little Rottweiler puppy. It had parvo, which is a horrible disease that basically a lot of animals don't recover from. That's what vaccinate against it. And the vet said to me, go and get your break. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. Go and get your break. Puppy's doing all right. I literally went and got a cup of tea and a biscuit, came back, and that puppy was dead. And I remember just sobbing my heart out because it was playing 20 minutes before. And the guilt was there. I've left that dog. It died on its own. But equally, I couldn't not take a break. I'd already done like a 10-hour shift. I needed a break. So it's kind of, and I remember crying in front of the vet, and male vet doing the usual. I'll just tap her on the shoulder because I have no idea what to do with this blubbering. I mean, we laugh about it now, and it's like, do you remember the day? Yes, I remember the day I was sobbing, and I don't cry pretty. I'm not movie star crying. It was full on. And the only emotion that came out of that afterwards was guilt and embarrassment. It should have been relief. Because I've let out those emotions, And all I felt, and I remember having to go and shift. So we'd worked weekends and then we have a few days off. And I remember having to go back and work with him on the Wednesday. And the first thing I did was got really embarrassed and went, oh, I'm so sorry about I shouldn't have to feel like that. And he didn't make me feel like that. That was in my head, that I shouldn't have done that. And I should have felt relief. I should have been happy that he'd been there to tap me on the shoulder, but console me and say, look, things happen. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
But we didn't really talk about it. I had my little sort of sobbing breakdown, and then I apologized to him on the Wednesday, and then it was an awkward thing.
Yeah.
And it's like a giggly, awkward thing now still. But do you remember when you had your little like crying session?
Yeah.
And I think we need to embrace that and say, actually, you let that emotion out and that was good.
Yeah.
Because if you'd have held that in, would that have actually impeded your life moving forward?
Yeah.
Would it have stopped you actually caring for another animal like that, maybe even?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I think that's, something that obviously this podcast is doing and these conversations are doing. We need to remove that stigma of being like you feeling embarrassed because you cried over something that's genuinely sad. Like, that's fine. Like, let it out. And I think, hopefully a lot of people tune into this episode and a lot of vets listen to this, and people in caring professions, I guess, who are dealing with this same sort of natured events on a day-to-day basis, and realizing, you know what, it's okay to feel this emotion. And like you said, I'm human. Like, I'm dealing with something that is, sad. Yes, maybe I need to show a certain face to a patient's owner or something, but as soon as that patient's owner's gone, if I want to go upstairs to the office and have a cry or have a debrief, go ahead, because that's the way you're going to move forward. Like you just said, you don't want to harbor it up, because sooner or later that's going to lead to a breaking point, which is what we don't want. And I guess you've been in a position as a company owner. You don't want your staff being that close to breaking point because they don't want to talk. If we can get to a position where they can say, hey, Kirsty, this last patient has, affected me, or just anyone in that veterinary profession, it can only be a good thing. And I think removing that stigma, regardless of the sector we're working in, is something that's really important. So I think you've hit the nail on the head there about just getting rid of that feeling of embarrassment and just being like, hey, it's all right. And the more people get used to that, you can only get better,
Definitely. And we are getting better as a profession. We are talking more, but as I say, we wouldn't have these stats if we were doing where we should be.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's blew my mind, like when I went and did the research on it, because obviously we'd had that conversation, and it's just so shocking. Like, when you read it like that, we can say that, that people are making strides to make it a bit more positive, but the fact is 4 times the national average, clearly something isn't working. Clearly something, or maybe not that it's not working, but it's not as acceptable.
I think the network isn't big enough. I think we haven't got encompassed everyone.
Yeah.
I think that's the issue. And I think we still have I'm the senior vet, the senior nurse. I don't want to show weakness. I don't want to show that this is affecting me, so we bottle it up. Yeah. We also have a big problem in the veterinary profession with something called compassion fatigue, whereby we are bombarded with, you need to do this for my animal, you need to do this, la 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 la, or I need you to do better with this patient or whatever. And then I think we close down when we get home.
Yeah.
So we may be not having these conversations with our family and friends that we should be.
Yeah.
Because we're kind of, right, we're home, let's put on a facade of everything's good. Pick the children up from school, get on with that, making tea, get on with life. And I don't want to burden my partner with all the stuff that's happened, because they may have had a bad day as well. Yeah. And I think having that channel of a supportive network, if you are having a bad day when you get home, you can chat to each other and you can decompress and just say, this happened today, it was terrible.
Yeah.
And I think knowing that you've got that as well. And I think we don't necessarily, there's a lot of vets and nurses who are working such long hours, they maybe don't have time to go and do these things. And what I'm saying is we need to step back and say, if I want to fix these animals, if I want to carry on with this job for the next 20 years, enjoying it, I need to go to my half an hour yoga class.
Yeah.
I need to sit in the bath and read my murder mystery book, or whatever is your thing.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do it, you're taking out half an hour. That half an hour is going to mean nothing to that veterinary practice. Nothing.
No.
It means the absolute world to your soul and your body.
Yeah.
And I think it's getting across. Someone once said to me, if you leave that business or if you leave that job, they're going to replace you. Your family and friends and yourself aren't.
Yeah.
So you need to say, I'm having that half an hour. Even if it is literally half an hour to, I don't know, whatever your favorite thing is, just do it. Just take it, because it is not going to make a difference in the long run to what you've left behind in practice. But that half an hour is going to make a massive difference to you.
Oh, 100%. I think that's what a lot of people need to realize, you know, that taking that time for yourself is only going to make you better in the long run for whatever you're doing. And that brings me to my next question, I guess. Obviously, we've spoke about the hours are like really full on. It's not exactly your 9 to 5 sort of career, but when you do get the time, or when you do manage to get the time, what sort of things do you find help you? And, you know, is that something where sport and physical activity come into play, just for a bit of a release, I guess? I mean, if I had all that negative emotion, I guess, that I was dealing with on a day-to-day basis, I'd need a release. So is that something that comes into play with yourself?
It's changed over the years. So when I was younger, it was, we're going to aqua aerobics, we're going to have a laugh, we're going to have this coffee afterwards. As I've changed, I've always, wherever I've been, I've always said I've got to go and swim, or I've got to go and get in water, or do something like that.
Yeah.
Now my main avenues are, I come home and I've got a punch bag, so I'll do some boxing. Or my other thing is very childish of me, but me and my 2 kids just dance, and we just stick on Just Dance on the Wii, and we flap our arms around and laugh, and probably got no exercise benefit out of it at all. But we just have a laugh, and we just, and it's same for the children as well. They've had a busy day at school, and it's just something silly that we do, and we just do that. Or the other thing is, I'll get together with a friend, and we'll take our dogs and we'll just talk about anything. They'll throw in what they've done. I might not even want to talk about work, but I just might want to just have a one-on-one conversation with someone about anything. And it doesn't, when we're talking about talking, I think one thing that resonated with me from one of your other podcasts was the fact that I might not want to talk about what's eating me. But for someone just to sit by me and say, did you watch Coronation Street last night? Wasn't that ridiculous? Coronation Street, but you know what I mean. Just having
other soaps are available.
Other soaps, but just sitting next to you and saying, or did you see the football, or whatever. I'm not sitting down to you and saying, oh, you look really miserable, do you want to talk about it? Because they might not. But the fact that they have that warmth of that person sitting next to them saying, you want to talk about whatever, what your favorite chocolate bar is, doesn't matter. Just knowing you have that connection. And I think that really resonated with me, because we always talk about be open, talk about your feelings and stuff like that. And I know I'm quite a private person, and sometimes I wouldn't want to, but just sitting down and just talking about anything. That resonated with me when he said last night when I was listening, that's good enough for him. And I'm like, everyone can do that. We can all sit next to someone and talk about whatever rubbish is in our head.
100%.
something really innocuous, but it just means you have that connection with that person who needs it at that time.
Yeah, I think that's like really important to just reiterate, because even on my workshops and stuff, obviously I'm talking about mental health. I'm talking about my story and my journey with mental health issues. But, with the sports sessions, if you don't want to talk about your mental health issues, good. But if you're getting something out of it, like you said, if you're making a connection and just having a conversation about random things, you're starting to talk and possibly taking your mind away from that, place that is consuming your energy. And I think that is really important. And you know what? Those conversations, the tough conversations, will come when they need to. But it's just about building up that confidence. I guess it's the same with, looking at your employees that you've had in charge. I'd rather them develop a personal connection with me where they can have that little, oh, like you said, did you watch Corrie last night? It's only going to make, in turn, that makes the tougher conversations easier. Because if I'm your employee, I don't want to just come to you straight away. Like you've said, especially in the veterinary profession, where we're looking at like a big stigma surrounding emotion. I might not want to come to you as my boss and say, hey, listen, that last operation, it's really affected me. Can I take that time? But if me and you have had a connection before where we've spoke about things outside of work, that's where I may be more inclined to have that conversation. So I think that's, a really, really important point to make. You are only going to have these conversations, I believe, when you've built a rapport.
Yeah.
And building that rapport is sometimes just what someone needs. Like you said, at the end of the day, I might not want to talk about it. And especially for me, it's my job now to talk about my mental health issues. So sometimes I don't need to, I don't want to. But for me, having the conversation about random stuff is what I need. So definitely, I think building that rapport is something that's so important. And especially, like we've said a fair few times today, in a sector where there is a stigma, some people aren't going to just jump out and be like, hey, Kirsty, this is what's going on with me. Something else needs to happen before that. And I think, when we're looking at stuff outside the well-being and the wellness, I think that's what's, really important going forward.
I think the other thing that before I was thinking about things that would help me moving forward. And I think having a toolkit, going back to this first aid kit thing, just having these are the things you may see in other people that may make you think they're not doing as well as they could be mentally. And I know it's maybe a hard thing to have, but I think embedding that in our sort of, when you start a new job, this is our mental health first aider. If you're worried about a colleague, we have a system. If things like I've seen it myself, where I've gone out and we've all been out of an evening, and you've sort of clocked someone's maybe drinking a little bit more than maybe seems acceptable. They seem to be kind of, the bottle of wine's gone before the starters appeared, kind of thing. And it's thinking, how can I do something about that without being, you're drinking too much, what's going on? So having a sort of, it'd be amazing if we could all be given these tools, not saying that we should all be looking out, what's going on with them and things like that, but just being in our consciousness, could we help that person? Could we just say something, or maybe mention it to someone, a colleague that knows them better? I went out for a drink last night with so-and-so. They seem to be drinking more heavily. Are they okay? And that person might have thought, I haven't noticed. And then, they're not okay. I can talk to them. So it's basically, I think it's trying to be, and it's difficult, but trying to be fearless and saying, I've noticed something, how can I do something? But being given the tools to actually do that without making that person feel like they're singled out or that
Yeah.
you think there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
I think that's the issue. And I think once we get to that stage where we are empowered to go, I can't do it myself because I don't know them that well, but I know their friend, I'll have a little word that I'm worried about that person.
Yeah, I think, like, from my point of view and my perspective, you know, asking someone if they're okay, it's never a bad thing. You know, if they don't want to talk to you, they won't. But one time I could ask you if you're okay and you actually need to offload. So from my point of view, you're not invading any privacy with asking someone if they're okay. You're just being a nice human being. If a conversation stems from that, then that's where you can go down different avenues. And also, like, looking at that, you know, having those conversations, I do think it is important that it is promoted and not to be scared to ask someone if they're okay. Because when I originally, you know, was open and told the world that I had depression, it was to obviously raise awareness of that and eventually move into this and talk about it. But when I did, not one person turned around to me and went, right, that's it, never speaking to you again, or disowned me or had bad feelings towards me. And you know what? If they did, that's on them. Like, that's your loss. And I think that's what's really important to encourage. Like, hey, the real people around you, your real friends, your real loved ones, your family, if you're struggling, they're not going to turn you away. They might not know what to say, but they might be able to get you help. They might be able to point you in the right avenues. And that's where we need to get to. I still don't know all the answers when people ask me things, but I can point people in the right directions. And I think that's where we need to get people to a level of being comfortable to have these conversations, even if it is a case of going, hey, listen, I don't understand what you're going through and I can't give you that help, but I'm here for you. But let's go and find somewhere that can help you. And I think that's where we need to get to, like, just getting people comfortable with just going, okay, rather than judging someone and going, oh, I don't want to talk to you because you're upset. Just be like, oh, I hear you. I might not be able to help you, but let's go and do this. That way, I know I've got an ally. Like, if I come to you and say something, I know that I've got someone, even if they can't directly help me, I've got a little bit of a weight off my shoulder because I know someone else is giving me some form of support.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if we could move forward into that mindset from the veterinary profession of that person, can I help? No, you can't help me at this minute, but I know I can go and talk to her at a later date because she's shown me that she will help me, rather than they're not doing okay, but it's a bit awkward and I don't know what to do.
100%.
So you kind of, and it is difficult because, as I said, I don't deal very well with crying. So if people cry with me, my instinct is to sort of kind of pat them and just don't really know what to do. And it's awkward because I'm like, there's tears coming. I've given the tissue and I'm the one who always goes, I'll go make tea. Because I'm like, if I'm making tea, I don't have to deal with the crying. But what I found in practice is especially when I worked in bigger practices, I knew I wasn't that person. I'm not the one who can console someone when they're sad, but I found the people who could. So when I was teaching, I knew which lecturers would look after the students better than I felt I could, because I would be the one, right, I don't know, I've lost my bus pass, so I'm not going to get home, I'm crying. I would find the secretary who would hold her and hug her. I'd go and search the campus for the bus pass. I'd fix the problem. I'd not deal with the crying. And people are like that. There are different people who have different skills. I'm 100%. Very good at the practical, you need to find your bus pass. That's going to stop the crying. I can't deal with the crying in the middle of it. But you know someone who can. So I think my thoughts listening to this, talking, is I'm not going to be able to do some of this stuff because it's not me, but I'm going to find people in my organization who can do that,
Yeah.
and support them and facilitate them and give them the tools to do it.
Yeah. I think that's
what we need.
Yeah, I think that's, if all organizations and careers could operate like that, it'd be an ideal world, because you got to play to your skill set. There's no point, doing something that you don't feel comfortable with or you don't feel experienced enough with. So I think that's, more than good. Now, nearly brings us to the end. It's time for our famous listener Q&A. So we've got 3 questions.
Okay, wow.
3 guests. And it's just, a nice little round off to the podcast. So are you ready to be put on the spot?
I am, hopefully.
Spotlight's on. I did promise listeners before that I'd come back with a jingle in the new year, but it's not happening. I still haven't got it. I haven't got the, voice of an angel. So we're just going to go straight into it. So the first one is from Sam, and we've touched on it a little bit. But what support do vets get in terms of if they are struggling with their mental health, and should they be getting more from governing bodies? I know there's like the Vets Association, and you mentioned someone.
So we've got the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons. There is some more help from them now. There is, you can call them and talk if you're worried about a colleague, but it's still a difficult one because they are seen as so they're basically seen as our investigatory body. So they're the people who take our role to practice. So it's difficult to open up to them. But we have VetLife. VetLife are a bit like Samaritans for vets. Charity. You can call them, talk to them about your concerns and worries and things like that. We also, there is a sort of cause that is not one more, which is basically saying we shouldn't. There was a statistic I saw in America between 2014 and now, 500 veterinary professionals have taken their life. 500.
Yeah.
It's like, when you think of that, it's just ridiculous. So we're all trying to promote the sort of, let's talk to each other, let's support it. How can we help? So there are avenues. So the main one, I've spoken to them when I was concerned for a colleague before, and VetLife are very, very helpful. They listen, they talk to you, but they are there. And I think more practices using it, more practices talking to them, and us supporting them through supporting their charity and talking about them, I think is very, very important, because they're a lifeline for us as a profession. And they also signpost you, right, well, this is what really you should need to go and do. So they're very good. So there are things out there, but I think it's getting people using them more.
So what I'll do at the end of this podcast, for any people in the veterinary sector that might be listening to this once it's shared, I'll share the information for VetLife. So if you have been affected by any of the conversations we've had today, that's an avenue for you to go down 100%. And just one question on that. And we go back to the stigma again. This is from me. I told you I'd geek out when I started listening to things. This is about the stigma. You've just said about like the Vets Association and the Royal Association for Vets, that, they're like a governing body, and they're like a watchdog, I guess.
Yes.
Is that something that like scares vets, I guess, in terms of coming out with, mental health issues? Because you don't want to be, I don't know, would they maybe strike you out if you was having issues?
There is the support network there, but I think they're seen as a position of all power. They can come in and investigate if we've done things wrong. There's sort of some people see them as the baddies of the veterinary profession, and they govern us, they make us our structure, they try and keep us in line, they make sure we treat the public how we should do, so on and so forth. And I think there is definitely a fear amongst the veterinary profession, if we come out as I'm bipolar, this, what are they actually are they gonna let me keep practicing if I tell them I'm struggling?
Yeah.
If I tell them some days I don't want to get up out of bed and go to work?
Yeah.
Am I going to be an advocate for the veterinary profession? Well, of
Yeah.
course you are, because the other 364 days of the year that you do get up and go to work, you're doing a cracking job.
Yeah.
And I think saying to these people that, yeah, you might have a awful day and you might not want to deal with patients. You might not feel like doing your job, but tell someone and they'll help you and they'll just give you something different to do.
100%.
So it's kind of, and think about the times when you actually have done your job to an absolutely cracking ability. And I think we, as a profession, as I say, a lot of vets and veterinary nurses are perfectionists. My other nieces were laughing at me the other day. I did an exam for work and I nearly resat it because I got 96% and I was fuming because it was an open book exam and I got a question wrong.
Yeah.
And they were like, you resit it, you could get less. It was an online exam.
Yeah, that's true.
You've passed with flying colours first time. What are you doing? I was like, but I missed a question. I got a question wrong. And it's stuff like that. And there are a lot of people in the veterinary profession who feel like that. And we make a small mistake that actually doesn't actually change the outcome of that patient's care, but we beat ourselves up about it.
Yeah.
And I think that is embedded in us and we need to remove that as well, and we can move on better if we know that we are human and we're going to get tired, we're going to make mistakes, and we need to go, actually, I'm tired, I'm going to make mistakes, I'm bailing out for an hour.
100%. I think that's, really important to say. You are, if not anything, a bigger advocate of the veterinary profession if you can come out and say, hey, listen, I struggle, I'm human, I've got emotions, and then you're still championing an amazing sector. Are you ready for your next question?
I am indeed.
All right, this is from Lauren, and she says, in your variety of roles over the course of your career, how have you adapted your own stance on mental health issues in the veterinary sector?
It's an interesting question. I probably, and this is going to make me seem very unenlightened, but I probably didn't notice mental health in the veterinary profession till the early noughties, late 90s, early noughties. And that's when I come across a couple of people who were struggling severely. So the lady I was telling you about who's self-harming and stuff like that. And then I went, whoa. And it wasn't really talked about and stuff like that. And so then I would say probably 10 years ago, it got to a point where I think it was 2004, a very eminent veterinary surgeon took her own life in the States, and everyone went, oh my goodness, 2014 even, oh my goodness, this is a big thing for our profession. And I think we'd all seen it, but I would say I've only really been enlightened about this sort of stuff probably in the last 7 to 10 years. Before that, it was there, and I, along with everyone else, just kind of went, you're on a bad day, just get on with life.
100%.
And so I would like to say I've been on this brilliant journey of enlightenment and stuff, but it was a big light bulb moment. She's a brilliant vet and she's taken her own life and no one noticed that she was struggling. And it hit us home. And I think that's when we all started sort of going, right, okay, how can we support each other? What can we do? The more of the sort of wellness stuff started coming into our CPD and trying to get people to talk. And I mean, really 2014, what was 8 years ago? It's not that long. Got a lot of catching up to do. And no, I don't think until I own my own business, and even then, only probably the last few years have I actually started fully embracing people are not just getting ill. There are stress illnesses. There is this sort of thing, and we need to support this workforce to prevent them getting to the stage where they need to have a month off because they're too stressed.
100%. And I think that's important.
So the answer is I wasn't enlightened. It just hit me really hard when someone famous in the veterinary profession, shall we say, took their own life, and then you went, wow, we need to address this.
You know what? I think that's the same with a lot of people. I think you look in the sports profession, and it's took, you know, people like Tyson Fury to come out, like these big time characters or well-known people, to be like, oh, this is real. You know, I've mentioned them a few times, but you look at Fury, you look at Prince Harry, people like that who are big names, and everyone's gone, whoa, mental health is real. Like mental health issues are real. So I don't think you're like the only one there. I think a lot of people have had to see bigger people or well-known people actually come out and say something to believe that it's exists, I guess. Are you ready for your last question of the day?
I am.
Oh, there we go. So this is from Matthew, and Matthew says, how do you balance the pressure of the job with the rewards of the job to like ease your stress and stuff? Is that something that you use?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I am happy to say it's something that I still love doing, and I'm lucky. We have loads of people leave the veterinary profession and they are amazing, but they get compassion fatigue and they just can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
I love my job. I love the teaching. I love the bringing on the new students and things like that. And it's really, really rewarding for me. The main thing I've learned through time is, one, to talk to other people. I'm not saying talk to other people about issues. I'm just saying just spread what you're doing. So if I've got 10 jobs to do, I'll say anyone else can give me a hand, delegate it, work as a team is one of the ways I deal with it. And also try and get rid of what's in your head. So you go and do an hour of boxing after you finish work. You go drive in the car if that's your thing. You go for a dog walk, and then when you get into your own home, that is you and your time. You may want to talk about the cute puppy you had in that day.
Yeah.
Try and dump. My thing is, I try my hardest to dump my baggage at the door.
Yeah, 100%.
It doesn't always work, and there are times when I've had sleepless nights worrying about what I'm going to go into the next day.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you can't do that, and I'm not saying it's easy, but that's my way of looking at the day. And also someone very, very cleverly taught me, what's your best bit, what's your worst bit.
Yeah.
How to get that in your head was my work. And most of the time, if you go for positive thinking, your best bit of that day, the cesarean where you saved 8 puppies, is better than the time when you took blood from a cat and you could only get a tiny bit of blood and then the cat savaged the vet. Great day.
Yeah.
But think of those 8 puppies or whatever. So try and look at the best bit and the worst bit and look at them on balance. And usually, not always, some days your baggage comes home with you because you've got no choice, because it's been a really not a nice day. But most of the time, the things you've done well outweigh the one mistake you've made that day.
Yeah.
And I think that's, from a perfectionist society, as we are as vets and nurses, look at that and say, how many goals have you achieved today? And okay, you did one thing that wasn't your best, but the rest was up there. Take that, don't take that.
Yeah.
And that's how I see it.
Yeah, I think that was something that I took from America. They used to do like a debrief with staff and some of the kids in that rosebud fawn. So your rose was the one big success of a day or a week or something. The bud was something that going forward you wanted to work on, and the fawn was something that may have been negative, but you always looked at that rose and the bud, and most of the time they outweighed whatever the fawn was. So yeah, 100%. It's really important to look at those positives. And one thing for me, I don't know how, you do it all, like the animals in there, how you don't have like a zoo at your house where you've like got
my house.
Oh, well, I was just gonna say, I mean, I've grew up around you, and there was times where there was definitely more animals than I'd ever seen human beings. But like, that's what I'm saying. I think when you look at it like that, there are so many shining lights. We've spoke about the negative emotions, but growing up as a kid, coming to your house and having essentially a zoo where we could see every animal going, that was an amazing part of it. And I guess when you do look at it like that, it is such a rewarding career to be in.
Definitely.
Right. So that brings an end to episode 6 of A Conversation With. Kirsty, I'd like to thank you for being a guest today. I really, really appreciate it. It's been, you know, a real good insight into a sector that not many people, you know about in terms of the mental health struggles. But I'm hoping after today, it hits home a little bit and we can do a lot more. So thank you for coming on and sharing that information with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been really, really good. And this conversation has got me really thinking about how I can support people around me and my colleagues and friends in the vet profession moving forward. So that's, if it's not done anything else, it's made me think what I can do to help in the future.
Good. I'm really glad. Like I said, I think, you know, you take a lot out of all these conversations and listening to the different podcasts. You know, it is really important to take things out. Before we go, I'm going to say it again. I will put the details up for VetLife on the podcast description, just so if you are in that veterinary profession and you are struggling, or you know a colleague that is struggling, you'll have that information to contact them. An amazing organization doing great work. Before we go, make sure you subscribe, share, follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Impactivity, Talking Without Limits. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm glad to be back in 2022. We've got some more amazing people and guests coming up over the year. Speak soon and stay safe.